Hello, welcome back to the Law of Karma, Destiny and Choice. Today we will be looking at a spiritual practice in the context of people. I'm in the studio with Sister Denise from the Brahma Kumaris. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Magla.
It is one thing to practice spirituality on one's own, and it's something else entirely to do so when you're amidst other people.
The point about Sahaj Yoga is it actually means that it is done in the context of other people. And of course there are periods of time when you are on your own, you have your solitude, but your life overall is with your family, in the context of the community. You have your work, your professional colleagues, and you are engaged with the world, and at the same time, moment by moment, you're still on your spiritual pilgrimage, you're still in your journey. Every moment of the day has the potential for testing your spiritual acumen. And this is done in contrast and comparison to the conventional spiritual practice where you're on a mountain, in a monastery, among other monks and nuns. You are away from the worldly world, and so you don't have anything physical to distract you. But this practice that we're working with here, you're right in the middle of everything. And it's actually better because if you distance yourself from everything, then you don't build up the capacity to be who you are regardless of what's going on. You get pulled into it.
When one is leading a spiritual life, is there a rule book for how to conduct yourself with other people?
The laws of karma are very much about how to conduct yourself in the midst of other people. And if you go into the details of your duty, because within the social setting you have social duties. So depending on your relationship with different people, there's a duty implied in that relationship. And so there is an expression fulfilling the implications of your relationship. So your relationship has something to do with a role that you play with another or a group of other people. And you have to understand what is required by your role and your position vis-a-vis that person in the social hierarchy. Your position is usually very different from what you are spiritually. You may be spiritually very high and have a position that's not particularly high. And this is going to test your ego. You may have a position that's very engaged, but your spiritual reality is that you're totally detached. So you have to be able to perform your role, understanding the implications of it, and second by second, as soon as your part is completed, let go and return to your internal spiritual practice. And the analogy that's given for this is the tortoise. So the tortoise pulls his hands and feet and head and tails out when he has to do something, some karma, and then when his karma is finished, then he will retract inside. And this is an analogy for a person in spiritual practice in the context of people. You go out, you withdraw, you go out, you withdraw, and you create a balance between being out there and being inside. So everything has a really nice flow, and you're in the world, but still not of the world. And the analogy for that is the lotus.
A lot of individuals find difficulty in their relationships. They have to deal with difficult people. They see human beings at their worst. They see human beings whose value system is the total opposite of theirs. How does one conduct oneself in a situation like that?
I think this is the whole point of doing your spiritual practice in the midst of other people, because it's very normal for people to have espoused values which doesn't correspond to what they do. It's very normal to be around people who have very different standards than yourself. But the whole point of spiritual practice in the context of people is you must learn by being hands-on how to interact with people who are difficult and who are not honest and who are violent and who are trying to trick you and compete with you and take you out and all of this stuff. An analogy for this is that you're on the battlefield. When you are with a lot of difficult people, you need to bring into play different spiritual virtues and different spiritual powers, and you have to make a constellation of virtues and powers that suits each situation, each personality that you're playing your role with, but always remember it's a role. I think people have difficulty with relationship because they don't think it's a role, and they don't think they're under test, and they think it's for real.
What do you mean when you use the word role?
You're an actor, and an act means you're performing karma. You're thinking, you're speaking, you're writing, you're doing actions, and you're in interaction with other people. And if you're in spiritual practice, then it means you're in school. Life is a big school, and you're under continuous assessment for how you play your role. And so you have to see not whether the situation is pleasant or unpleasant. It's a given that it will be challenging. It's supposed to be challenging. If it's not challenging and you're not challenged, then there's no merit in responding to the challenge. So the point about being in spiritual practice is, first of all, to realize that it's a 24/7 thing. It's not that you're being spiritual when you sit in meditation and the rest of the time you're normal. No, it's all the time. Any moment, your spirituality will be tested. And why is so that we know whether it's solid and whether it's for real. And so you have to be around challenging people, challenging situations, which force you to delve deep into your resources that you are supposed to be accumulating in your spiritual practice and applying it moment by moment. Of course you will fail lots of tests. This is normal. But when you fail enough, you start thinking, okay, why am I failing? What do I have to do differently so that I pass? And eventually you do pass, and you become expert, not by theoretical knowledge, but by practical circumstances.
I've heard you use the expression, to take sorrow from another is a sin.
Yeah.
And what did you mean by that? And how does one not take sorrow? When someone insults you, when someone says something hurtful, it's a very natural human reaction to feel upset or angry about it. So you're saying what?
What I'm saying is that these natural human reactions also are weaknesses, because you are not able to respond proactively, you're not able to be independent of somebody else's karma. So if somebody's insulting you, that's their negative karma. If you get upset by it, that's your negative karma. So the test is that in the face of some negative karma that's directed at you, can you receive it not as some negative thing that you should respond to negatively? You receive their negative karma, you change it into something that's to your advantage, and you accept it as something that carries you forward. So you don't accept it as it is, you accept it as you decide what you want it to be. Take everything to your advantage. That means you're not a normal person anymore. But being a normal person means that you get affected, you're vulnerable, you are taken down easily. This is not success, you can say.
It's quite obvious that when you're with others, you have to deal with your own ego as well as theirs. How does one navigate through that quagmire?
I suppose normal human interaction at this time is clash of egos, moment by moment. And your ego is the sign that you're spiritually weak and depleted. And you put up the ego as sometimes it's called an ego defense posture, because you're weak. If you're strong and you're not ego-based, but you're in your power, then when somebody comes at you from their ego, you detect it. Oh, this is an ego performance. And rather like a martial artist, you would take that energy and you will move it such that you don't take a direct hit, you send it one side or the other, maybe even the person will fall down by their own ego problem, but you stay in your, what is called in our practice, stay in your seat of self-honor. So self-honor is very different from ego. Ego is when you're weak, self-honor is you're in your power. And then it means that you're not reactive, you're proactive. It's quite subtle, but there's no clash of ego in that. And in every situation you come out well, you see, because each situation is a test.
This is a lot of work, isn't it?
Sometimes it can be said that if you want to develop yourself spiritually, you can do it to the level of a virtuoso violinist, and that means that you have to practice a lot and daily, and you have to make sure that you have your technique and your interpretation, and you play your role as a very high quality competent actor. So it's all about developing capacity and competence.
That applies to relationships? Capacity and competence?
Absolutely, because a relationship is not an easy thing. And you have to see what you want this relationship to be. What's your side of it? How can you make the relationship beautiful, meaningful, pleasurable, memorable, and even an example for other people. And this is a very worthwhile thing to do, because you don't make money from having a good relationship, personal relationship, but in some ways, yes, because you have your business relationships, all these relationships, if you do them well, you go in profit, and circumstances are favorable for you, so it creates fortune.
It is quite common to find oneself in a situation where you meet the same type of person again and again and again. You've got one such person in your house. For example, you have an angry person who lives under the same roof as you. And then at work, you have an angry colleague. And then within your friendship circle, you have somebody who's angry. Given the fact that you're the common denominator, is there a lesson there?
Two things I would say. On the one hand, there's quite a lot of angry people around, so it's a bit difficult to avoid. And on the other hand, you need to be able to handle violence.
How?
You need to not be, put down by it. You need to not be controlled by it. Don't be afraid of it. Stand up for yourself. Maybe you just need to be able to stand up for yourself without being reactive, you see, because you have to neutralize their violence, and you also have to be in your own power so that their way of trying to control you through violence is rendered useless. Because you don't operate with that currency. Predator and victim. Sorry, I don't do that game.
So, one requires courage.
Courage, skill, setting boundaries, not being attached, not having expectations. There's many details to this, and you play the game in many different formats, in different circumstances, but all of it is for developing your skill in these different challenging situations. And when you're around someone who's violent, it's going to be challenging. You may be a bit timid, that's your weakness, so come out of that.
In another episode in the series, you used the word enmeshed. And that, from a spiritual perspective, is a problem, whereas from a normal human being's perspective, it's what they seek in a relationship. If you're enmeshed, what are the dangers and how does one get out of it?
Well, I think not only it's a spiritual problem, but it's also been identified in the psychological therapeutic community that enmeshment is a sign of mental illness. So if somebody is operating in their relationship, especially their intimate relationships, by thinking that enmeshment is the way to go, they'll always be disappointed, they'll always experience terrible trouble in their relationships, and if finally they get into therapy, it will be indicated to them that they have an enmeshment problem. So enmeshment is like you have two fabrics that are knitted into one, but the thing is, you're not one person, you're two people, and you have to have boundaries. Enmeshment means that you drop all of your boundaries, you give away all your power, and it becomes completely dysfunctional. Learning these things is very important. I think one of the problems is that we have a culture that encourages all sorts of unhealthy relationship styles. And then who profits from that? I don't know, divorce lawyers. I don't know who profits from that. Certainly the children are very badly damaged by that. The participants in that marriage are badly damaged. It increases the use of alcohol and drugs because people can't manage anything, so they go for different addictive substances. It can even make people ill. It can encourage road accidents, all sorts of, subsidiary problems arise from this enmeshment problem. And people call it love.
Yeah, people call it love. When it comes to the thorny subject of dysfunctionality, I once heard you say that dysfunctionality is contagious. So, given that most individuals come from dysfunctional households, how do you stop yourself from perpetuating your own dysfunctionality and making it someone else's problem? First question. And second, how do you deal with other people's dysfunctionality, which is also omnipresent?
In the practice of Raj Yoga, all the time you are encouraged to engage in a relationship, a deep personal relationship with God. And the one being who's not dysfunctional is God. If you have a relationship with a dysfunctional person, the contagion will impact you and you will easily get sick from it. But if you have a very substantial relationship with God, this is going to protect you from that contamination, first of all. And second of all, it's going to show you so many ways in which you can be functional in interaction with other dysfunctional people and minimize the problems because you won't play that game. You see, the dysfunctionality is like it takes two to tango, and if you don't play the game, you stay free. But then, for that, you have to be in a strong connection with God and willing to be alone. And this is the challenge for people.
Yes, why do so many run away from being alone?
When you're alone, you're sort of much more aware. You can feel how vulnerable and how weak you are. And people don't like that feeling. And this is also why if you can be willing to be alone and willing to feel those things, and then also having a very deep relationship with God, your interaction with God is how you will handle your weaknesses, because you will draw power, virtues, qualities, and so on from God. And the way that God responds to you, because God is very reciprocal being. When you do the wrong thing, God will withdraw from you. When you do the right thing, He'll come close and give you the kind of the reward of the feeling of closeness. And in a way, this is how you are being raised as a soul to be functional in the context of human beings, and still not contaminated and still not dependent, but still very adept at interacting with people, so that your karma is always putting you in positive consequences and fruitful. You plant good seeds and you are not damaged by other people's bad karma.
Say more about planting good seeds. That's a lovely expression.
Yeah, every time you talk to someone, or someone comes in, goes out, you eat together, walk together, whatever it is you do together, there's always a possibility of conflict, misunderstanding, taking what they're doing badly, feeling neglected, getting insulted, all of this kind of thing. You don't have to go down that road, because what they do is up to them. And then you're concerned not with how they are with you, but how you are with them.
That is different. Coming back to one's relationship with God, how exactly does the relationship with the divine impact on my relationship with others? The reason for this question is that there's the misconception out there that if you're spiritual, you don't hang out with other people much.
I think that it's because you're choosy. When you have a very strong relationship with God or with the divine, all the time this is reminding you of who you are and what your quality and caliber is. And so you become very choosy, and you choose people that correspond with the higher aspects of yourself. You have weaknesses, no doubt, everybody does. If you choose people that correspond with your weaknesses, you'll go down. When you have a strong relationship with the divine, it inclines you to choose people that correspond with your strengths. And so there's a lot of people with a lot of weaknesses out there who will just bring you down, and you don't get pulled into it because you see it for what it is. Your third eye becomes active, and you can see where it's going. You see it's going nowhere, you don't bother, because you value your time, you value your energy, and you see this is a waste of time, I'm not going to bother.
Okay, so on that note, we'll say goodbye to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for joining us. There you go. How to relate to others from a spiritual perspective, or if you are practicing spirituality. I hope that you have heard something in today's episode that has resonated with you, and I hope that you're able to apply it in your daily life. Take care, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.